Go.
Aaron, it's election day 2020 here in the United States, quite possibly one of the pivotal dates in all of human history, if the news is
Could
to be
be.
believed.
Yeah.
So I can't think of any better way to thoroughly educate our listenership than by answering Discord questions about old video games we used to play. It's Ask the Amigos, November 2020,
I
Aaron.
love
And we're
it.
going to kick things off right away with Mr. Lord Soup's first question. He says, like many of us, I enjoy games from my distant childhood and before. I'm frequently amazed with games that are crammed into 64K, 16K, etc. Which games stand out to you for as wonders of coding with regard to being crammed to a small cache of system RAM? Primarily, I'm thinking of 8 bits.
Well, I'll tell you right, the first one that pops into my mind, and you know what it is, don't you, Bode? It's
I have
Elite.
no idea.
It's Elite.
Oh, yeah.
That is a
yeah.
wonder. And when I first got that game, and I was like, this all fits on this floppy disk, I was stunned. I was stunned at that, Bode.
Mm-hmm.
I think Elite is a genius game. I may not be the best at it. I may not be. It's maybe something I don't play all the time, but just the sheer genius of it, I think that's easily at the top of my list. What about you?
For me, I think about growing up and not really understanding how game programs worked. I thought that if I, could somehow look at a disc or look at a cartridge with a good enough microscope, I would actually be able to see like the levels etched in the PCB. And I remember playing Metroid on the Nintendo for the first time, and I remember just thinking, this game is the largest game world that's ever been conceived. Like, I wish that I had that special security bit so I could open up the Nintendo cartridge and look and see it all mapped out there, as if I could just like look at the thing and get a map of it. That's one game that I remember definitely being amazed at. Now, I have no idea. I think most Nintendo cartridges were like 16K ROM or something like that. But that one was one that really blew me away. On the computers, I didn't really play that many epic games. So when I had the Atari, it was mostly just arcade ports and text adventures and things like that. It wasn't until we started doing this show where I started being exposed to the big games like Elite and stuff.
I'll tell you, if I go to consoles for a minute, I remember the first time I saw Pitfall 2 on the Atari. I couldn't freaking believe that. I mean, Pitfall 1 was pretty impressive, but Pitfall 2 was huge. And it had an end that was awesome. I thought that was a really impressive game. And then going back to the NES, and, I'm not the NES guy you are, but I remember the very first time I saw Super Mario Brothers, I could not believe the depth and the graphics and the sound and the music. I was just like, holy smokes, because, I mean, that was a quantum leap to me.
Right.
People talk about Mario 64, and that was also a quantum leap. But I mean, the original Super Mario Bros. Can't be overstated how impressed that was at the time, because that game. I remember, like I said, I've said this before. It's the first game I ever saw, and I thought to myself, man, we're going to be playing this thing even when we're older. It's not like, because we were used to just taking games, playing them, and tossing them. So
right.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I think it's funny that both you and I both saw Super Mario Brothers played for the first time at the same Kmart. Probably.
Which is now defunct, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Patrick Street,
unfortunately.
Kmart.
Did you see where somebody climbed to the roof of the Kmart and stole all the copper out of the HVAC units?
That doesn't surprise me. That's what we do around here.
There's something like $25 million worth of damage, and they won't be able to rent that building out and all. It's a real.
The funny thing about these
time.
copper thieves is that they will. I mean, because we just had some guys steal some copper right down the street from my house, down
really?
beside Fruth Pharmacy. They stole a bunch of copper, and it did like thousands of dollars worth of damage. They said the total copper value was $100 and some bucks. and I guarantee you, all the copper they shipped out of that Kmart, they probably did millions of dollars worth of damage for probably $500 worth of copper.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Eric Nelson asks, in your entire gaming history, who was your favorite player to?
I got to go with the Chud, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, good choice.
Because the Chud and my good buddy Chad, he's one of my all-time favorite guys to hassle, and because he always reacts when I do something. He's always surprised when I trick him. He always is flabbergasted when he's defeated or something happens, and it's always hilarious. And so when I remember playing games with Chad, and I would have a shtick when I won, and it used to, and to this day, if I say the words, "you're good," that's all I've got to say. He goes bananas because he knows the shtick is coming, the full shtick. I've got a speech I used to give him.
Well, don't leave us hanging. Give us the speech.
I would say, I'd say, Chad, you're good. Some might even say you're mediocre, but you're not the man. And I would say, and it would drive him nuts. And it's a stupid speech, but he hated it. And I had a bunch of stuff. I've been kicked out of his house. I've been, he's left. He's thrown the stick down and left. Or refused to play games ever again. I remember one time he said, I'm done playing any video games. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that was awesome. I love that. I love that guy. What about you?
I didn't play video games with that many people growing up. I was mostly a solo video game player. The exception is my good buddy Logan, who lives down on Charlie's Creek, and
poor guy.
he lives way
Yeah,
out there.
That
He was my first
forever.
He was my first exposure to people that lived way out there.
Yeah, that's way out.
Yeah, and but anyway, I used to go over to his house and spend weeks and weeks there during the summer. Just completely move away from my home and stay with him, and we would play just like endless rounds. I think I've talked about this before. We'd go from the NES and we'd play all the NES games until they were exhausted, and then we'd go upstairs to his parents' bedroom and we'd play PC games, horrible CGA PC games, and then when that fun was exhausted, you know what was next? Oh yeah, baby! It's Socrates time, and that's when the Socrates came out.
That's your third string, is the old Socrates.
Yeah.
Oh,
and there's
man.
nothing that bonds a player 1 and a player 2 together like the Socrates.
Like some math challenges.
Like laying it down.
Oh god.
That's right. That CAD program.
Oh man. Geeks.
Yeah. So Logan, who I think has been on one Amigos video, I think, he is now I did play a lot of games with Hat Chad, but Hat Chad is more of an observer. He was content to sit and watch, and we'd play, and I'd play stuff, but yeah, Logan definitely my number 1 player too. RSN 8887 asks, what is your favorite Amiga public domain game?
Just off the cuff, all right? I'm going to say my favorite, and we did this one early on, Alien Fish Finger.
Man, I was going to say the same thing.
I love that game. I'll go back to it quite a bit. It's got a cool vibe. It's cool looking. It's fun. It's simple but fun, and it's actually it's pretty large game. So I'm going to go with that one.
I'm going to go with Hangar 18. Also
that was
good
another.
one. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. That thing's crazy, man.
Yeah, just for the amount of depth and the amount of craziness that's going on in there. You can fly vehicles around in that game, which is insane.
Much like Star Trek, these are the games where these guys just had a passion. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's why. So they just poured all their passion into their game. I love that.
Yeah. And I also really like that game that you hated, the game where you're drawing a line, sort of Etch-a-Sketch style.
Yeah, I hated
you're trying
that. I know you guys.
But
love
again, that's mostly just down to the warm memories of Amiga Ireland, just everybody crowding around together, cheering, drinking. Yeah, it was a good time. RSN continues with, what is your favorite frozen pizza and why?
Free.
Are you not particular about your frozen pizza brands?
Listen, have you seen me recently? Well, I mean, no, I'm not that particular. I'm gonna say, I'll tell you what those ones you can get for like $1, like the Sub Tombstone.
Like the Totino's party pizza.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the one I would love to have, but I mean, that's what I've had the most of. I mean, I like your Tombstone. I'll tell you, if I had to pick my all-time favorite, remember when you could, and this is back, they've changed this, but you used to be able to get these really great pizzas at like Kroger's and stuff. They would sell the pizzas that they made there, and they
they
still
wouldn't
do.
Be frozen. They'd be refrigerated.
Yeah, they still sell them, but they're not the same. Those were great back in the day. When I lived in Lexington, I used to have a lot of those.
Those are still a cut above. Anytime you have something that's sort of made more recently and chilled rather than frozen.
Yeah.
I would say, I tend to skew cheaper on my frozen pizza. I find that DiGiorno is not very good. I've never been a big fan of the crust on DiGiorno.
Yeah. I understand.
With a frozen pizza, I tend to favor a thinner crust. And it gives it a more chip-like nature.
Yeah, I don't like those.
You don't like the thin crust?
No, I'm not a big fan of the thin crust.
Okay.
It's just like it's like eating It's almost like eating a taco shell.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Okay, I can respect that.
Yeah.
RSN finishes his trilogy of questions asking, have you ever been electrically shocked yourself? Let me just start over. Have you ever electrically shocked yourself really bad, and how and when?
Hundreds of times. Hundreds of times I've electrically shocked myself. When you're in this business, you're going to shock the crap out of yourself. I've shocked myself on arcade machines, fooling around with refrigerators, washer and dryers, messing around in the lab. I've shocked myself many times. At Lexmark, we're shocked quite often. After a while, you get used to being shocked. I've been shocked on an electric fence. That sucked. I didn't like that too much, I'll be honest with you. Don't grab those. That was probably the worst.
It wasn't a Ren and Stimpy situation?
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Don't whiz on the electric fence.
I told you I saw a chick whiz on an electric fence one time. It didn't go too good for her.
No! Stop the presses.
Yeah.
Let's hear this story.
Yeah, we were at a cow pasture one night, a bunch of us. And this
sounds like West Virginia.
This girl I know went to go take care of business. And don't ask me how this happened, by the way, or the logistics of it, because I can't tell you. But I just heard this colossal wow, wow, and saw this chick rolling down the side of the hill, and that's what had happened. She'd lit herself up. So yeah, wow. That was funny. What about you?
Never. I've aside from Static Shock, I've never shocked myself, and I've worked on CRTs. I've decoupled the flyback and all that stuff multiple times. Uh-huh. And I've just been lucky. I'm surprised I've never shocked myself because I've done some real stupid things with electronics, but nothing that's resulted in a shock, fortunately.
The old man, my dad worked at John Amos Power Plant for a decade,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember more than once him coming home with a weird look on his face, and he had taken like 400 kajillion volts or something.
Cow.
And he would, literally looked like he had a weird look to him, like he had been. You could tell when he'd been lit up. So he's another one. I'm going to chip off the old block when it comes to getting shocked.
Yeah. Simulant asks, if and when Lord Sugar finally builds his Amstrad Museum, are you up for flying over to visit it? I can maybe even provide a sofa to sleep on or an inflatable airbed.
Let me tell you something. If Mr. Sugar, Lord Sugar, which I love his name, by the way.
I was just thinking that. I'd love to be called Lord Sugar. One
thing about the Amstrad, I like the fact that you got Sugar as the man. If we can get past this COVID situation, the day they say, yeah, you can go anywhere, it's all good, I will go anywhere and sleep on anything. I can't wait. I'm ready for any kind of action, baby. I'll go to any museum you got. Museum me up.
Me too. Simulant also asks, would you consider bringing back our Sinclair, but instead calling it our Spectrum Next podcast? Now that would be a killer show to be the only Next podcast with modern and classic specky content.
No, because I don't know. I don't have an X, and I don't know anything about the Next enough to where I would feel comfortable naming the show that. That much said, we'll probably do some more R. Sinclair stuff down the line. I know you've done a little bit already, so.
Yeah, just from looking at the community surrounding a lot of these new things, there are people that are sort of chomping at the bit to take other people down.
Yeah.
And I feel comfortable putting ourselves in that situation.
Yeah.
Because the next community is different. It's different just from following all the different groups on Facebook. But like Aaron said, don't fret, my pet. Our Sinclair may be coming back sooner than you think.
Hey, you know what I saw today? Just off the side. Someone's made like a new version of the MSX that's floating around. Have you seen this thing?
Really?
Oh yeah.
Is this another some FPGA board?
I don't know what's in it, but it takes the cartridges. You can use all the peripherals, so it looks sort of like the MSX version of the Spectrum Next. I just had a cursory glance at it. It just kind of crossed my radar when I was tinkering around on Twitter this morning. So more info coming, but that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, that would be cool.
We're covering MSX2 on the ARG this week, so that's how I found it.
I'm eagerly awaiting your game choice because I think I may try and emulate this one.
Well, I'm trying to find something that's exclusive to the MSX2, so I'm still looking.
Mm-mm. Okay, next is, let's see here. Kit, his first question on Ask the Amigos. If you had an extra $500 to spend on a retro gaming item or something to spruce up your gaming area, what would it be?
Go ahead, Bo. What do you got?
All right, I got this one all lined up. I would buy a Vectrix. I've always wanted one. I think you can get a Vectrix with a couple games thrown in for around $500. I would probably spring for one of those. It would look great on the shelf behind me, and that'd be what I'd get.
Something from a, I have to, I don't feel, I'm not a greedy dude, Bo. I know despite what you think.
I've always thought you were a greedy dude.
I've got so much cool stuff. Like, what I got in the mail yesterday?
What'd you get in the mail yesterday?
This.
Lint roller?
This is that send-in laser light gun.
Right. You backed that on Kickstarter.
Yeah, thanks to your boy. And I hadn't even played with it yet. I haven't got a chance. But I've got so many nice things. I have to think. I suppose I would like to have, I've mentioned this before, if I could have just something to have in the room to play with, I would like to have an FM Towns. Either an FM Towns or an FM Car Marty. I would take either one of those.
You could definitely get out the door with one of those for under $500.
Oh, no way.
No problem.
And the thing is, it's a lot like the MSX. I mean, it's a full-blown computer, so you have to, figure out what you're doing. So I need a sucker to help me, too. So I wouldn't mind having, like, one of the Japanese computers back here to tinker with. Or also I would like to have a Sam Coupe. I'd like to have one of those, too. So there you go.
Yeah, Sam Coupe is a very strong choice. That's a very strong choice. Bundy asks, what was the first video game that blew your mind?
You've been hitting the bottle boat? What was the first video game that blew my mind?
Yeah.
Well, this is a generic answer, but I can't help it. It's true. The very first thing I saw that blew my mind was freaking home Pong. I couldn't believe that because you could actually play the TV. I know that's generic, but it's true. Like, I'm telling you, we never thought about the concept of playing stuff on the TV. We just watched the TV. Who knew you could fiddle with it? I remember on the Odyssey, when you could type your name in to a game, your name was on TV. It sounds stupid, but it's true. Fuck, where's my name? If you're talking about a more, like, after I knew what video games were that blew my mind, I would have to probably go with, really, the Zaxxon was up there. I mean, I remember that thing looked so awesome. Would be up there. And Dragon's Lair is another one. That really, when I saw that, I would say that was the most mind-blowing thing I saw at the time was Dragon's Lair. So I'm going to go with that. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's hard to remember what really blew my mind. Like, there was stuff that really impressed me that I thought that was super awesome, but there was nothing that I saw that I was really like, man, this is really world changing until really, and you mentioned this before, was Mario 64. When I saw the way that you could move around in a 3D space in real time, because at this point, we'd seen lots of, sort of like the Dire Straits video. You'd seen lots of 3D conceptual renderings, but they always moved kind of slow and they always looked sort of bad. And Mario 64 was like the realization of that in video game form that looked amazing and played just as well as it looked. So I'd say that blew my mind even more than the original Super Mario Brothers.
I have to say that was that game gets a lot of dap, and it should. I mean, it really was a pretty impressive display. Another one that popped into my head while you were talking was, and this is another, but it's true, it's generic, but it's the original Doom. I remember going over to Chud's house. He goes, look at this. And we looked at him like, Chad, did you get a new computer? Did you get a new video card? I mean, I legitimately asked him these things because I didn't think a computer could do that. And I was pretty computer savvy at the time, but that was another one. It was such a freak out. I do wish, Bo, that you had been. I wish this is one of the advantages of being my age, despite the fact you make fun of me. Is like I was there pretty much right at the beginning of video games, and it was awesome to see the evolution of the stuff from seeing like Pong or Gunfight or something at the arcade or Space Invaders. Then you can play Pong at your house, and then all of a sudden you're playing the Atari and you're playing Combat and stuff. I mean, stuff blew my mind perpetually for decades. Because the leaps were unbelievable, and even now with like virtual reality, the first time I played with that over at Brent's, it was also pretty impressive. I was like, man, this is really neat. My mind's been blown a lot. I'm simple-minded too. That helps.
Well, a big thing is that I cannot recall a time before video games. Like, I remember seeing video games for the first time in 1985 when we moved to Hurricane and my next door neighbor had an Atari 2600. I was 4 years old. So like there was never a time that I cannot remember having video games around. So, obviously the first time I saw video games, my mind was blown, but it wasn't like when I was, 14 or 15 and I saw Mario 64 for the first time and I could put those things into context. And so, yeah, you definitely have the advantage there of being old.
Do you remember, since you saw them at 4, did you play games a lot as a kid? Was that something you did quite often?
No, we got the Atari. My parents put pretty strict limits on the amount of screen time that I got growing up. The computer was always in the living room, and I remember playing. I mean, I might play a game, for an hour a day in the evenings while my dad was watching the news or something like that. But it wasn't really until I was older, probably until I was in like maybe 5th or 6th grade when we got the Nintendo and it was down in the basement, that I really started devoting a more unhealthy amount of time to video games. But growing up, when I was, say, in my, early childhood years, I don't think I played a whole lot of video games.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a little kid, I played, my favorite thing was the record player. Then it was the tape deck. And playing with Hot Wheels or Legos and stuff. Now look at Luke, my son, and he had Thomas the Tank Engine trains, and he had some Hot Wheels. But, I mean, it was pretty early on where he discovered video games. And he doesn't give a crap about anything but games, fortunately. Yeah. And I think a lot of kids like that now. So I feel kind of bad for him, but I guess that's just the way it is.
Yeah, my favorite thing growing up was the record player, too. When my parents, my mom, she went to a yard sale and bought just this huge pile of Disney records and stuff like that. And I would sit there and just listen to that turntable all day long.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm saying
all right. Let's see here. Coming up next, this is from Chris Folds. He says, history is written by the winners. Which is your favorite underdog system?
You got a thought on that?
Boy, it's hard to say what is an underdog system. Maybe definitely the GameCube. I mean, the GameCube is definitely the ultimate underdog system because, it was outsold by both the Xbox and the PS2.
I wouldn't call that an underdog system. No way. Because it was still had tons and tons of jack.
But I mean, that's why I said, like, how do you define an underdog system?
I'm talking about a system that was awesome.
Like the Cyberco?
Well, not necessarily. But I mean, like, I think you could say something like, I mean, in terms of mainstream, something like the TurboGrafx in America. I would say that would qualify. A very capable machine that didn't get a second glance here because it got smashed by better, more favorable competition. Now would that be my choice? Not necessarily, but I'm not saying the GameCube. I mean, you can choose whatever you want, and I wouldn't choose the Jaguar. Someone mentioned that because the Jaguar just wasn't very good. In my thoughts, an underdog is a great system that just got buried by other systems. I think the Dreamcast would qualify as well because people bought it. And then it got slammed when the PlayStation came out because people, and then they were gone.
Well, I mean, what about the Coco? I think the Coco is the ultimate example of an
that's the thing is the Coco was very successful though. It's hard to pick a computer.
Well, I mean, it's very successful relatively speaking. I mean, it's like how the Amiga was successful.
Well, no, it was more successful than that. It was a lot in America. It was a lot more successful than the Amiga. So it's a tough. I mentioned. I would say that
it would be interesting to see how many units of the TurboGrafx 16 sold in America versus the Coco.
I would say not even close. Would be my guess. I'd say it would the Amiga or the Coco will have sold. The Coco sold very well in the States. It wasn't a dud.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I've never looked at the sales numbers for either system.
We got L. Curtis Boyle in here. Something tells me he probably knows the answer to that. But I think the Coco, is a good choice. But I think it was too
Yeah.
popular to be an underdog.
Yeah, I think popular is in that you're sort of like to the Coco the way that Tenmark is to the Amiga. You know, you were in the scene, you were all
No,
up in
no,
it.
that's not.
So
No, no,
in your
wrong.
mind,
That's not the
no,
same. No, the
it's
Coco
totally the
was
same.
way more over than that. The Coco had national distribution at every radio stack in the country. I mean, and people sold. They sold, and keep in mind, it was also built off the backs of a very successful computer line. So yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm going to go with TurboGrafx. There you go.
Okay. Chris Folds also asks if you could get one new class added to the school curriculum, what would it be and why?
One new class added to the school curriculum. Is ethics taught in school right now, Boat?
No, in fact, that would be a valid answer.
I was going to say
the problem is that nobody can agree on what good ethics are.
I was going to say computer programming, so I guess that's my choice in terms of something that's have more material use, I think. But ethics would not be the worst thing. If we could all, again, you're right. If we could all establish what ethics we wanted to teach, or it maybe like communications wouldn't be the worst thing. And I don't mean telecommunications. I mean like verbal communications. But it's tough. It would be something that would be less like materially tangible, more like spiritually tangible. Something that could help people get along. I don't know what that would be. I'm going to say ethics, though. Let's go with that.
I have two courses I'd like to see added. One is to bring back debate. I think that this figures into your answer of communications. People don't know how to take the side and present an argument of something that they don't necessarily agree with.
Shut up, Boat. You're an idiot.
Right, exactly. And so teaching that skill is invaluable. And we used to do that in school, but we don't anymore. And then the second one is personal finance. Like, you've got to get in there and you've got to teach kids how to, when they get money, how to actually manage it and use it correctly. Because gosh knows parents aren't teaching their kids that.
So they don't have any sort of finance. I thought they had some sort of home ec or something in there. They taught that
home ec was abolished from the curriculum literally decades ago.
They had it when I was in school. Although
when was the last time you were in school?
Ironically, get this, Boat. When I was in school, I didn't have home ec because you didn't get it if you were in the band.
I didn't. I got home ec when I was in the band. You didn't have Miss Schaffner?
No, we didn't have home ec.
Monkey bread?
I never had home ec, not once.
Man, you missed out.
Or shop. I didn't have that either.
Man, that's crazy.
The band took those slots over.
I don't know how that worked, but anyway, I would bring back home economics.
Yeah,
and I would,
that's a good choice.
Probably update it, but yeah.
Okay. I'm often shocked how, and listen, I don't consider myself commander checkbook or whatever, but I'm shocked how stupid people are when it comes to finance and their own personal finances. You're right. That's a darn good choice.
Duncan Stiles asks, do you ever just go for a drive for the sake of going for a drive? Where do you go?
We do that. I do it. I will say I don't do it as much as I used to just because of the nature of my job. That much said,
you're in the car a lot.
I do it at the job. I take all kinds of crazy routes just to see different areas, I mean, because the places I go are so far out, I could take several different routes to get there, so but I mean, occasionally I will hop in the car, usually grab the chick here, and we'll go out and let the kid fall asleep in the back seat while we look at cows or whatever's on the road or whatever, it's pretty around here, so you can sort of do that, can't you, Bud? Or just sometimes we just drive down to Point Pleasant for no good reason, stuff like that.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I did that a lot.
Me too.
More often.
Yeah, me too.
And even into college, a part of it is just being able to you have the freedom to get away from your house, get away from your parents. I used to drive out in Hurricane. If you went out and you went underneath the interstate bridge and you came up the hill behind, if you go like out
Benedict Road.
Yeah, Benedict Road, all those places.
Go up there to the
and I used to go.
Yeah.
It was like, and it wasn't like a Happy Days like make out point thing. It was just like you go up there with your buddies and you just park the car and you just sit and talk and listen to the radio or whatever. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done the same thing.
And so that but these days, Eep and I probably the closest thing is that more often than not we'll take Route 60 whenever we go anywhere if we can just so we can look at. There's a lot more stuff to look at. Driving out to St. Albans or even going out to South Charleston or going the other
You
direction.
can pretend you're driving on the moon because the road is so craterish.
Right. But yeah, I love driving. One. I think I might have talked about this before, but if life had fallen differently to me and I didn't become a teacher, I could definitely see myself being a truck driver. I really enjoy the open road.
I will say a lot of it depends on gas prices. That's also that.
That's very true.
Or also if you've got a valid sticker on your car, if your car can make the drive. There are several things in my life that will determine whether I take long drives or not.
Right. Nifta asks, I may regret asking this, and he asks you this in particular, Joel or Mike?
I saw this pop up, and I've been pondering it for quite a while. I love both guys. Okay, we're talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000 here, by the way. I love both. I will say the new guy, not him. I don't like.
Who's the new guy?
I can't remember his name, but I don't like the new episodes of Mystery Science Theater. They're not nearly as good. I love Joel, but I'm going to say my favorite's Mike. And I think the reason I'm going to say is this: Mike had the better films. Joel was in between the film stuff was better than Mike's, but Mike had better films. So I'm going to go with Mike. But I mean, it's like asking me my favorite Doctor or my favorite Bond. I mean, you're talking about just a tiny bit of difference between my favorites. So yeah, but I love them both. I just think Joel's got better films, and I will say, or Mike, Joel's stuff is also so old now that the references are ancient even by my standards. I mean, they're super ancient.
It's funny because I'll watch MST3K from time to time, especially on Twitch, because there's a Twitch channel that plays just constantly, and I do notice that with Joel. It's just like he'll say stuff, and I'm like, boy, not only do I have no idea why that's funny, I have no idea what he's talking about.
He will often reference stuff up in the Twin Cities and up in Minnesota and stuff because that's where they were where they were at.
Sure.
And if you watch the KTLA stuff or what was I thought their old stuff from the public access station, it is really localized. I mean, you have to almost look up some of the stuff that they're talking about. And Mike's stuff, you got to remember, a lot of Mike's stuff was on like the Sci-Fi Channel, so it was distributed like that. And so, but I mean, Joel had a ton of stuff on Comedy Central. It's just that Mike's stuff is not as old, but Mike did get better films, I think, because Joel got some films I didn't think were that great. Although Mike, don't get me wrong, Mike had a couple real duds, but they weren't his fault. Neither were they Joel's fault. So it's just a bad film. But Joel's experiments and stuff, because they had that experiment exchange. And they got rid of it for Mike after a while because it didn't make as much sense because Joel was a comic that was a prop comic. So that stuff was taken from his act. Whereas Mike,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mike wasn't a prop comic. He was just a comedy writer that got sort of drafted in because he worked on the show as a writer for years and years.
Right.
So when Joel left and Mike stepped in, it's like there was no reason to keep that. I mean, they kept it around for a little while. I will say, I definitely have my favorites in terms of his adversaries. I'm not a fan of Pearl. I liked it much more when it was Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank. So if you get the Mikes with Dr. Forrester's and TV's Frank, those are my favorite ones.
Let's see. Frodo NL asks, what is your favorite stage or movie musical?
Rocky Horror Picture Show.
No, that's number one with a bullet.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. That's my favorite. But I will say, in my defense, it's not like musicals or something I went on my way to see. So it's one of the few things I've seen the stage performance and the movie and listened to both soundtracks, so I have an intimate knowledge of it. So there you go.
I've got a couple favorites. I really like Fiddler on the Roof. I really like the Hairspray, the new musical Hairspray, the one from like 2006. Let's see, what else I'm trying to think of ones that I've played in that I really like. I really like The Wiz a whole lot. I like the film version of Hello Dolly because the cast is just perfect. But I wasn't a fan of the stage production. Same with The Sound of Music. I think that the film adaptation of Sound of Music is way better than the stage adaptation. My least favorite ones include most of Rodgers and Hammerstein, including Carousel and Camelot. Oklahoma. I find all those to be unbearably boring. And Candide, which was a huge disappointment because I love the soundtrack for Candide, but the actual musical, I went to New York to see it, and it was just the worst. It was the dirt worst.
See, this is a question that's definitely geared towards you because my experience is I've seen very few like musicals like on stage, and then out of those I can remember even less. It's and the ones I've seen, like I saw like Cats one time, for example, and what was the other one I saw? I've seen a few stage productions. Some were musicals and some weren't. But I like the music from some of these. Don't get me wrong. Grease wasn't that a Didn't they do? They turned into
that's a musical.
I like this.
Yeah.
But again, I'm familiar with the movie, not so much the actual stage performance.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like I said, the movie can either be better or worse than the original production. Frodo mentions Jesus Christ Superstar. That one, amazing.
Good song, good soundtrack on that one. Yeah.
And it's interesting. That's another one that has some really interesting differences between the movie version and the multiple, staged ones.
Hair. That was one I liked the soundtrack on that one.
See, I've never seen Hair, I've only heard, the songs from the radio. Yeah. Let's see here. HSI asks, in an alternate reality where you didn't grow up with the systems or computers you did, do you think you'd still have interest in other systems like you have today? For example, if Aaron grew up with the NES instead of the Coco, do you think you would even notice the Coco existed today?
Well, if I did not have a computer background, if I was like Boat, right, and grew up, I mean, you did have the Atari, though, so even you had a computer background. So if I had grown up, like, just with consoles, I doubt I'd be into, I doubt there'd be a show like this, or I'd have a bunch of crap sitting around my room like this, but it's funny. I grew up with computers. I think about this quite a bit, actually. I've thought about this the other day. Like when I had the Coco, right, I thought that was awesome. But I knew there was better stuff out there, okay? And then when I had the Tandy 1000, I thought it was awesome. But I knew there was way better stuff out there. Now, when I had the Amiga, I thought, hey, I'm pretty close. I mean, you're playing a lot of console-level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm shooting straight here, Boat. I think one of the big key elements to my love of computers is piracy, straight up piracy. Because the one thing I couldn't do is get stuff for consoles, even if I'd had them. I'm not saying my mom and dad wouldn't have bought me software and stuff, but they didn't. After the Odyssey, they never did. And so part of my love affair, I mean, I'll admit it, I love a lot of substandard or less than adequate stuff. And it's because I grew up, part of it was just obtaining stuff. Sort of like if you've ever read Rob's book, Commodore, he goes into his obsession with obtaining Commodore 64 software, all right? Now, I didn't go as overboard as Rob, just because I didn't have the structure around me that he did, right? But it was a driving force in my enjoyment of the platforms that I was pirating on, right? And so I try to think of what would have happened if I'd never gotten into computers, right? It would have probably ended up like Brent, where I rented a lot of console games and played that stuff, and I don't think I would still have I certainly wouldn't have the passion for computers because I would probably think they were mostly pointless because I would have never went down the piracy road where I did it. And so I don't think I would be into that stuff now like I am, strictly on the basis that I found another path. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
Well, I grew up, the thing that keeps me coming back to old computers is not the fact that they offer a better gaming experience than consoles, because 9 times out of 10 they just don't. But what does is the sheer amount of variety and the sheer amount of unique titles that would have never seen the light of day on console. Like a game like Hangar 18. You would never see that in a million years, and it's the stories of the people that make these games. All the bedroom programmer stuff I think is really fascinating. And it's also harkens back to a time when, like, here in the West, we actually made crap. It's like, it's awesome that they made Spectrums in Dundee, Scotland. There was a line, there was an assembly line that was cranking out computers and it wasn't in Asia. It was here, here in quotes. And it's the history that I think is so compelling about old computers. So I think even, and I'm a big history guy, so I think even if I hadn't grown up with the Atari, I would still have more than a passing interest in computer gaming history.
It's funny because you mentioned how console games pretty much are hands down ahead of computer games, and it's funny as a computer guy, I would totally disagree with you without any basis in fact. And the reason I say that, is if you grow up specifically a computer guy, you look for different things in games, and so I would look for things that, like for example, role playing games on the PC were completely different than role playing games on a console, right? And so I always thought the console, and to this day I still think that, right or wrong, but I always found them highly inferior to PC role playing games. Because part of it's not like they couldn't have played them and vice versa. It's just it's a totally different type of game. We looked for a different type of game. Now sometimes the PC would try to play in the console's world and get smashed. You know what I'm saying? And also you get that mentality. It's that you get that mentality. It's like why the Genesis guys and the Nintendo guys can't get along, right? It's because that was their system. You grow up with a certain allegiance to it, and so you got that going for it too. But yeah, I think
But here's the thing. You're right to a certain extent, very, very, very early on. Okay, so like what you say has merit up until the NES comes out. But guess what? Ultima on the NES and the port's awesome. Wizardry on the NES and the port's awesome. Bard's Tale on the NES and the port's awesome. So that whole line of thinking is something that's continually perpetuated among sort of like the classic PC is the best crew, but it's just factually untrue.
Well, listen, you started a couple examples, but there are plenty of other games that weren't as nice on the consoles as they were on the PC. Plus, the PC gave you, there were certain advantages to it.
Oh yeah, what I'm saying is from a strictly, if you just strip away everything other than the gaming part of it. Now the thing is, the PC gives you gaming plus everything, plus a career path, plus communication. The PC offers a much better total package than any console, and that continues to be true to this day. But if you're only in it for the gaming and you don't care about anything else, then I mean, there's a reason why there still are consoles, even though PCs are so cheap and so powerful and everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. What can I say?
Let's see here. Moving on to Paul. He says, "Have you or someone? Nope. Have you or?" I'm gonna read what I think he's written. Have you ever known anyone that has claimed that they've seen a ghost?
Yeah, I live with one. In fact, she just went on a ghost hunt 2 weeks ago. Yeah, tons of people, tons and tons and tons of people I know will have claimed to have seen ghosts. I don't necessarily know if I've seen a ghost, but I have seen weird stuff.
It's been a while. It's been a while since you've told the Daveronis.
We just told it a couple weeks ago.
No, it's been about a year.
No, it hasn't, because I watched the episode. I just went over it. I'm not going over that again. You ask it every time. And that wasn't a ghost story. That was a me jacked up on weird chemical story. I don't know what the hell that was. No, I've heard weird stuff. I mean, I've never physically seen a ghost. Like where I thought to myself, unconditionally, that is a spirit right there. Mm-hmm. But I know plenty of people that have. So, Yeah.
I think that in Thailand, well, these days actually, I this is probably not true anymore, but in Thailand, they are much more attuned, maybe, or open to paranormal experiences, just as part of their sort of folk religion, where it's tied up with all of these elements of Buddhism and sort of ancestor worship and just sort of spirits and ghosts everywhere. And so Eep's mom has talked about how when she was a girl, she would go out into the field at night to use the restroom, and she would see she would just see like lights and stuff, and this is back when there was no electricity, and she would just see like lights floating through the trees and stuff like that. So, I always try and keep an open mind about that stuff. I think that, the mind is a powerful thing, but there's also stuff out there that we don't know about. I've never seen a ghost, though.
The Amazing Randy just passed away a couple weeks ago. You remember that? A very famous skeptic, and a guy who's hated by the paranormal community because all the skeptics are not they're not welcome with the paranormal community because they badmouth these guys and call them idiots.
That's their job.
I'm not nearly as believing in this stuff as I was when I was younger. Not even close. And I find it an interesting trend that belief in the paranormal and spiritualism and whatnot are on the uptick in America right now, because I think it coincides with the fact that we're dumber than we've ever been. I don't want to rag on people that believe that stuff. I'm just saying it concerns me a little bit. That there was that weird phase where everyone was making a ghost show, but 10 years ago.
Has that I don't keep track of that stuff at all. Is that sort of abated?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, it abated. It's because there were, and there's still some of those shows on the air, but I mean, it was just like anything else. It was overkill, but that spawned a lot of people that got interested in the paranormal and ghost hunting and whatnot. So, I mean, I guess it's a good thing, but I mean, I'll live with someone who's partially dedicated their life to that study. And you've seen the library I've got in here. It's unparalleled in that community. It's also unparalleled. That library is unparalleled in its baloney. I mean, we could have a deli in here with the amount of baloney on these shelves because the people that write this stuff are absolute idiots. All right, now there is some good stuff on the shelf, but there's a lot of crap, and Tree would be the first one to tell you that.
Because I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because you are so well versed. Like, what are some?
I'm not that well versed.
Well, I mean, in terms of like baloney troops that you see trotted out again and again, what are the ones that come to mind the most?
Well, it's not so much that it's like tropes or whatever. It's just the fact that if you pick up any random book out of this collection, okay, and look at it, okay, and read it, you can tell that the person that wrote this was an absolute idiot. Like, it was written by an idiot for the consumption of morons. Now some of these books, people actually give it the college try. They actually write something that's semi-intelligent, but a lot of them are garbage. I'd say 70% of the library is garbage, and it's. And listen, I grew up with the Bermuda Triangle book and the Philadelphia Experiment, and those, if you go back and read them, they're horrible, and they don't make any sense, and they're lies.
You want to hear something funny about the Bermuda Triangle book? I think I've told you this before, but many things scared me as a child. Okay, and so the Bermuda Triangle book, I think this was a popular book because my parents just had it.
Yeah, everyone had that one.
Yeah, and I read it. And it scared me so much that I put it on top of the refrigerator because I couldn't even look at it like on its spine on the bookshelf.
Wow.
Yeah.
I believe that with you.
I hid it from myself.
It just I've been to plenty of these conventions and stuff, and I've listened to like some of the top people in the field give lectures, and they were crap. I guarantee you. I've told Tree this, and she bought it. You could give me any topic, and I could walk up in front of a podium, and I could spin a better yarn than what these so-called experts have put together. I went to one where they were talking about it was a combination talk on ghosts of the Civil War and ghost sex. Okay, now ghosts of the Civil War, okay, but ghost sex. How could you have insight on that? Also, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And so guess what? This talk was garbage. She played a music video about the Civil War twice just to kill time in between her horrible, stupid lecture. And this chick was nationally renowned as an author. Okay? Horrible. So, yeah, after I've been exposed to this for decades, I don't put much stock in it because I think the people that at the tippity top of the field are idiots. And as you get lower, they get more and more stupid. So there you go.
All right. Duncan Stiles asks, how often do you change the oil in your car? I heard the official advice in the U.S. is to change it much more frequently than in Europe. Is that true? My car requests a service every 12,000 miles or 12 months, though you can set it for a long life, which gives you a bit extra.
Does your car tell you when to change the oil?
You can set it to. It's basically just a timer on the miles. It doesn't. Don't. I've only had one car. I had a Honda Civic Hybrid that did give me a warning when it was time to change the oil. I guess there was a sensor or something, but that's the only one. But yeah, the conventional wisdom for years and years in America was 3,000 miles. Older cars that used non-synthetic oil, you did have to change the oil much more frequently. I think on the whole, in Europe, in the UK, I think cars are much newer. People don't keep beaters around as long as what they do here in the States. Like you'll frequently in Hurricane, and you'll back me up with this, Aaron, you'll see cars from the 80s and 90s on the streets as a regular occurrence.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. If for newer cars that have
Repo.
synthetic blend oils, you can get it like for my Hyundai, which is a 2017, they recommend 75,000 miles per oil change. How about you, Aaron?
Are you kidding me? You're asking me this question? I don't know jack squat about cars. I got a little sticker.
Well, you know how often you change oil.
Yeah, not enough. I got a little sticker on the car that tells me when to go back, and then I wait an extra, say, year, and then I go in. You know, my car at work, when they always tell us to basically go 1.5 times what they say to do on the sticker. And so, but in the state of Kentucky, they basically, when COVID kicked in, they abolished all oil changes and basically maintenance unless it was emergency. So I haven't had the oil change in that thing for a year. So it's probably due. Wow. But I mean, I haven't drove it that much because I just drive it to do the work stuff and that's it. But I mean, the other guys that take their vehicles home, that's a whole different story. But for me, I just drive that thing at work. So it doesn't get that many miles on it, you know. My personal car, you know, I just take it in when I figure it's time. I've got that sticker that sort of tells me how many miles I've got to have on it, but man, I just don't pay much attention to cars.
It's a feel thing for you.
What's that?
It's a feel thing for you. No, you just like when it feels right.
Listen, you don't want to know how not good at paying attention to this stuff I'll just put it that way. But I mean, I'm sure, in fact, this conversation will probably spur me to go and get it done.
All right. Well, we are about at the hour mark, so why don't we take a quick break and stop and start a new recording?
Okay.
And I need to use the facilities and refill the water.
Should we? All right. Thanks for joining us for this week's. Bye-bye.